Welcome to Comic and Screen. I'm Sam Otten, and with me is Jason Book, and we are going to be talking about the Button storyline in the comic books that just wrapped up. It had 2 issues of Batman, 2 issues of Flash, giving us a 4-part story that is following up on some of the threads from the DC Universe Rebirth Special, with Batman and Flash teaming up to try to figure out what's going on with the Watchmen Button, and going through time a little bit to try to see what is really happening with the universe and what is the force that maybe has been taking time or rearranging the universe unbeknownst to the heroes in the DC universe. So what were your reactions in seeing the conclusion of the story or to part 4 in particular?
Well, I like the way things wrapped up overall. I like seeing the art of Howard Porter on there. One of my things I was concerned about at first is how the art would mesh, but I found his style really worked well with the kind of traveling through time and space aspect of that book. So that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
I like the banter back and forth between Flash and Batman and how they kind of were dealing with things. The way, like, the Flash is a cop and Batman's basically a detective, so I like that. But I did find when I got to the end of this one, I felt it lacked a little bit of like a big reveal at the end. Like, I know we got some reveal and we'll talk about it after, but I thought maybe we were going to get a little bit more. And I like where things are going, but we'd have to wait until the fall now for them to kind of continue this. So I just kind of felt like it was a really good meal, but it was missing a little bit of extra meat in it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I actually had the same reaction, and we have not even talked about it yet before recording, so it's funny that we do kind of come at it the same way.
Mm.
But I felt like it was a good story, well told, the art was really good, the dialogue was really good, so I was enjoying it all the way through. But just like you, I kind of at the end of it was like, oh, I thought there was going to be a little bit something bigger that was going to be added to the Rebirth, kind of story arc that's going over these kind of couple years.
Yeah.
So we will talk about what we do see at the end, but what we see at the end, we all kind of suspected already, and we didn't get really like a big impact of it. We just got like a glimpse of it, of something that we kind of already knew was what was there. So yeah, I think that's really my only drawback, though. I mean, really, I enjoyed most of the stuff going on. Howard Porter's art I thought was good, and I thought it worked well with Jason Fabok's art. And then we had colors by Brad Anderson and HiFi. So the art teams, I think, worked well as a team over these 4 parts. And then the writing was Joshua Williamson was taking the lead, but Tom King was helping out as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the stuff that I really liked about it, I liked the balance between the personal aspects and then the sort of action pieces and the larger, kind of plot that was moving forward. I thought they had a really nice balance between those two things. Like, one of the big parts was Bruce Wayne and his father, Thomas Wayne, from Flashpoint. And at the very beginning, we saw this glimpse of Thomas Wayne, and Bruce kind of like sees it and reacts, and then we get a really nice payoff to that later when Bruce and Thomas actually get to talk to each other, and that's a really kind of heartfelt, meaningful scene. So I liked having that personal side together with like Amazons and Atlanteans that are like busting into the Batcave, and and then like the action with the Flash and Reverse Flash. So I thought a really great balance.
Yeah, totally. And I think the writing really complemented each other too, because they did that smart thing where the Batman books kind of had Batman narrating his thoughts, Flash narrating his thoughts, and it kind of came together nicely. And yeah, like I really like those touches, like to detail, like how it started out with the hockey fight in the first one, and then in the Flash one, how you're going through, things in his own book that kind of feel more like a Flash book. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. It was well plotted, and the just overall decisions of how they were going to put it together, what they were going to put together, I think they made really good calls on that. And Reverse Flash is kind of the villain of this little 4-part story. Of course, we have the bigger kind of threat that's going to be coming later on in the fall.
Yeah.
But just in terms of Reverse Flash, I mean, I think he was a very effective villain because he is able to move through time, which works well visually and for the story, taking them where they kind of needed to go for the story. But having a really memorable fight scene with Reverse Flash on part 1, and then in part 4, seeing how it all comes together, like, oh, it comes full circle with the way that Reverse Flash met his demise, and we got to see more of how that happened. So I thought that he worked well as a kind of villain that pulled us through different parts of the story.
Totally. And you also see, too, that I believe they're taking a page out of the Flash TV show. It really had that feel of the Flash villain coming back and saying, I kind of made you who you are because I had part in your mother's death. And you see that we've talked before on the show how that Flash TV show was really well done. Haven't seen as much lately, but it really kind of set the stage and the bar for how to tell a good Flash story. And if it's, done well in one medium, why not borrow some of that in the comics as well? So I like seeing that kind of cross, continuity in a way, because some people might just be picking this up for the first time and say, oh yeah, I know that from the show, and it makes them feel a little less lost.
Yeah, that's true. Like here, when he was mentioning that with Barry's parents, and then Reverse Flash makes that threat, like, maybe this time I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually come in and raise you, and you're not even going to know that this is your enemy, and that, like pretty dark stuff that Reverse Flash is threatening. Mm-hmm. And comic book readers, they can connect that to all this comic book history of the Flash, but TV show watchers who are just maybe getting into the comics since Rebirth, they can just make that connection to, like, oh yeah, I remember from season 1, like that's kind of what he's referring to. So it works well enough for anybody to come into it.
Yeah, totally.
So the other thing, the character that I thought did not work as well, or it wasn't really bad, it was just a little bit out of left field, was Jay Garrick in part 4. So Jay Garrick is all of a sudden kind of trying to speak to Barry from the Speed Force, kind of like Wally West was in the Rebirth Special. And then he comes out and is able to push them back, Batman and Flash, he pushes them back to their real time. And then he kind of gets swept back up, or whatever happened to Jay Garrick. So, I mean, for a Flash book and for Flash fans, I'm sure it was cool to see Jay Garrick get that moment. And he was drawn well, but for me, I just didn't see him coming. Like, I don't think he was set up in the earlier parts of the story for me to expect that Jay Garrick is going to play a role. And then he kind of just leaves, so I'm not really sure what his purpose was other than to just push them back into their time.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually thought when we saw him, and I saw him on the cover, they were going to do something really out there and kind of place Jay Garrick in the Watchmen universe in parts of the stories and say, he's time traveled before, or he's been to different universes. Why not put him in the background of a major scene of Watchmen and have him something to do with something in the mythos? Because if you're going to mix these worlds together, do something like that. So I feel like they kind of missed the boat on that. I can't see them doing it after the fact. They've already showed him, but yeah, it felt like more like a tease. Like, why bring him in unless you're going to have him do something major besides just being a messenger? That's kind of what it felt like, eh?
Yeah, and maybe they were trying to give Flash a kind of a personal connection. So Bruce had Thomas, and so maybe they were trying to have, let's have Barry interact with Jay Garrick. But it didn't really have the emotional resonance because Barry couldn't actually quite remember him, and then he was gone.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so, for me, that was one spot where I kind of was scratching my head a little bit. But maybe they do have a plan for Jay Garrick in that fall story. I'm not sure, and so they wanted to make sure to bring him up in our minds this time. But for this particular story, just as one story, he kind of came out of nowhere and then left.
Totally. He literally went in a flash. Couldn't resist.
Did he kind of look like the character from the Flash TV show? There's this one panel where it was his face, and I'm like, oh, it looks like they kind of were inspired by the actor who plays, in the Flash TV show.
Yeah, totally. You can tell that they're doing that a bit, which is cool. Once again, I mean, another tie to the show. Nothing wrong with that, because I haven't been watching it as much lately, but it was doing quite well for a while. So I imagine it brings in some more readers, because the Flash book is probably doing better than it used to do. When I went to look at it online, it looked like it was pretty high up in the sales.
I think it is, yeah. And
obviously a lot to do with this crossover, but it's still cool to see the book doing well.
Yeah, I think in Rebirth, I think it has been doing pretty well since then. So I want to pick your brain a little bit about what we do have at the ending. So like we said, it doesn't really get as many answers as we maybe expected at the start of the story. But we get some nice moments here at the end as the story wraps up and kind of goes into its conclusion. So first of all, we have Batman thinking about what his father said to him. He said to him, don't be Batman, kind of be a father to your son, find happiness in your life, and don't feel like you need to be Batman. And at the end, we have this great scene where Bruce is really contemplating that, and the bat signal lights up, and Alfred's like, hey, are you going to answer that bat signal call? And it's kind of ambiguous whether Bruce is going to answer it or whether he's thinking about what his father said. So I thought that was a nice ending to the emotional side of it, of what Bruce has been going through with this story.
Yeah, I like that as well. I mean, we've seen that throughout the years in Batman. He has no shortage of Batman family or sidekicks that could take over the mantle if need be. So I've kind of seen that before, but if they're doing something different with it, and maybe he doubts being Batman, and they could do something in a story where maybe the city gets more overrun with crime or something like that, or maybe something kind of like Spider-Man 2, where he doubts being Spider-Man and then comes back even better at the end. Then that could be kind of a cool twist, I think.
Yeah, so that'll be fun to follow forward. The other big thing, obviously, is we've known that Dr. Manhattan is probably behind this, and we've gotten lots of pretty clear hints about him. But this is the first time now where we see Dr. Manhattan's hand, and then we hear him talking even. So it's definitely confirmed now, that he is the one that's, kind of the one behind all this, and he's probably the one that Reverse Flash saw and then kind of ripped Reverse Flash apart or whatever happened there. So what are your thoughts now about actually seeing Dr. Manhattan confirmed?
Well, the same thing as we said earlier, like I would like to see more of this, although the epilogue did really feel like in that style of one of the Watchmen books, so it was kind of cool. But I can't help thinking throughout all this that they're kind of just doing this as a way to restore the multiverse, because if you think of the original Crisis, happened right before Watchmen, you could easily interlink the two story-wise if you wanted to. Dr. Manhattan has the power to do anything in the book pretty much, so why couldn't he just decide to pick and choose timelines or make a new multiverse? Kind of seems like it's heading towards that, and if that's what it is, I won't be surprised. So I want to be surprised, and if we're just going to get a big book where Superman fights Dr. Manhattan, that's kind of cool, but I kind of want something more than that,
Yeah, the way Geoff Johns is talking about it, I think it is going to be something more, because he says, my whole life writing comic books has been building up to this story for November. I think all the skills that he's developed, all the stories that he's touched, the characters that he's touched. So I think it is going to be, something more than just a fight between those two titans.
Yeah.
And speaking of Superman, so yeah, the last little panels that we see are in the Watchmen kind of layout. And we get the button, and we zoom in on the blood, and then we pull out, and that red has turned into the Superman S shield. And this is something, in hearing that Superman is going to be central to this November storyline, the Doomsday Clock, and then seeing Superman here at the end, which I was not expecting. I was not expecting Superman to maybe be one of the main characters in how this ends up, because it's very much been kind of Flash-driven, and then, definitely Batman connected. And I could imagine some other characters, but I didn't really think of Superman first. But I love Superman, so I am excited to see how he might play a role in it.
Totally.
And I do know, it did make me think, and I finally made the connection. So back in the DC Rebirth Special, Saturn Girl is there, and she is saying that she needs to find Superman. And so now I'm like, oh, she was brought back up in part 1 of the Button storyline. And so maybe Saturn Girl is going to be a connection that brings us to Superman and brings Superman right into this main Rebirth story, kind of going from Rebirth to the Button to then the Doomsday Clock.
Yeah, I could see that. I definitely have to read that again. And, thinking of what's been going on in the regular Superman book, too, I mean, if they are going to be doing something with, restoring multiple versions, Superman's been having a lot of that going on in his own book, too. So that'd be kind of a nice twist with that. But, yeah, what you're saying about Geoff Johns and everything, it really sounds like they're working towards something big, and I can definitely see kind of taking stuff from the entire DC history and putting it back, because why not? It's there, right?
Yeah, and one thing that's cool, too, is I think Geoff Johns said that it's just going to be a Doomsday Countdown or Doomsday Clock story, and they're not going to try to tie it into 50 other books, which I'm happy to just, let's get the story, let's go through the story, and don't try to pull me in 40 different directions.
Well, that's the thing, and that's what was good about this crossover, too, because whether we thought the ending was a little flat or not, it was a great, crossover story-wise, to be more compact, and also financially, too, because we've mentioned that several times. Comics are expensive, and, if you can read a story for this would have cost $16 to buy versus $40 or something like that, it makes a big difference, and especially for something like this Doomsday Clock thing. I mean, they could have made it a tie-in like they did with Crisis back in the day, where every book had a tie-in. Just imagine buying that every month, right?
No, so, all right. I mean, I enjoyed this one quite a bit, but it does leave me wanting more, and I think that is going to come this fall. So thanks for talking with me about it.
Oh, you bet. Anytime.